Yesterday, I spoke with Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Hedges about the notion of crisis cults and the collapse of complex societies. But we also discussed the nature of the economic machine that's responsible for this collapse. This system is fueled by profit. And although its nature is so blatantly unsustainable, humanity appears bound to it. The insatiable greed that drives the gears of the machine has never been more evident than today. With global inequality at a record high, it's a topic I was able to explore with Hedges more in depth. Chris, let's talk about that new Oxfam study that recently came out that shows how 85 people control the equivalent of the bottom half of the world's wealth. What's your response to people who say that we just have to remove those 85 people?
Well, it's a system of corporate power, which is not necessarily driven by individuals so much as driven by corporate interests. ExxonMobil, Citibank, Goldman Sachs. So you can arrest and imprison the head of Goldman Sachs, Lloyd Blankfein, which is where he belongs, but somebody will take his place. What has to happen is that we have to break the back of corporate power, which is now global, and break the logic whereby everything is about profit, that nothing has any value beyond its monetary value. That's an extremely dangerous moment for any society to live in, because when nothing has an intrinsic value, whether that's water, air, human beings, then the ruthlessness of those corporate forces mean that you will squeeze every ounce of potential profit. I mean, everything becomes a commodity, and you squeeze those commodities until there's nothing left, and that's exactly what's happening. So it's not individuals, it's the rise of corporate power, which is a species of totalitarianism, it differs from past systems of totalitarianism, but it is no less totalitarian than fascism or communism were totalitarian forces.
Right. I mean, the system is a machine at this point. If those people died today, it would still grind on. Right. In a recent article you wrote, you discussed the menace of the military mind and how only devotion to established forms of behavior will result in individual success. How do you think this concept applies to Director of National Intelligence James Clapper and his feelings towards journalists who have exposed NSA documents?
Right. Well, I speak as a former war correspondent who spent 20 years covering conflicts around the globe, Latin America, the Middle East, the Balkans, Africa. So I know the military really well, and blind obedience, aggressiveness, resort to violence, all of these things, destruction of kind of individuality, all of these things work really well on a battlefield. They don't work very well in a peacetime society. So when Clapper made this comment that Edward Snowden and his quote-unquote accomplices, and he was clearly referring to journalists such as Laura Poitras and Glenn Greenwald, should be prosecuted, I understood exactly what he was saying, that he comes out, he was a former lieutenant general, he comes out of this military culture which detests the press and has always made war on an independent press. Their vision of journalism are all the little sort of lackeys who sit through their press conferences and follow them around and write sort of glowing tributes to their heroism or, whatever they're directed to write in press pools. But actual journalism is something that within the military culture they're deeply hostile to. And the triumph of military values, again, is symptomatic of a civilization in decline. The rigidity, the celebration of hypermasculinity, the lack of empathy, the belief that every problem should be dealt with by force, both internationally and domestically. Militaristic, hypermasculine regimes speak exclusively in the language of force. And then you see within popular culture, subsequently, a celebration of those hyper-masculine military values. And, I've been in enough combat to tell you that those values are quite useful in a firefight, but they will destroy a civil society. And I think, again, that is another window into how tattered our civil society has become, and how we have shifted our allegiance from an open society, from empathy, from a capacity to embrace various opinions and outlooks and political stances, to this increasingly rigid, militaristic society. And Clapper is a figure who I think exemplifies precisely this sickness.
Chris, in a recent speech you gave, you said, quote, "I do not know if we can build a better society. I do not even know if we will survive as a species. But I know these corporate forces have us by the throat, and they have my children by the throat. I do not fight fascists because I will win. I fight fascists because they are fascists." Chris, Glenn Greenwald recently spoke about how one man, Edward Snowden, has changed the world, and that singular capacity is the antidote to defeatism. What do you regard as the antidote to defeatism?
You can't talk about hope if you don't resist, and Edward Snowden has certainly resisted heroically. You know, we must carry out the good, or at least the good insofar as we can determine it, and then we have to let it go. The Buddhists call it karma. I come out of the seminary, that's what faith is. It's the belief that it goes somewhere, even if empirically everything around you seems to point in the other direction. Once we give up, once we stop resisting, then we're finished. Not only finished in a kind of literal sense, but finished spiritually and morally. And so I fall back in moments of distress like this on that belief, which is one that I learned in seminary, that we, we have a capacity and an ability and a moral duty to fight against forces of evil, even if it looks almost certain that those forces will triumph.
That was Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Chris Hedges.